So, today we're starting a new sermon series that I believe has the ability to change the way we see our lives almost completely, called Everything Holy. In that, instead of seeing and breaking up the world into two distinct categories of the spiritual and the normal, the sacred and the profane, or church and everything else, which of course is our default position, this series is designed to help us begin to see that everything is holy, or that every part of life, no matter how mundane or hard it may seem, is actually filled to overflowing with the presence and power of our God. And so, to help us get into this series in a way that I think everyone can relate to, because we've all experienced it before, this morning we're going to be walking through the first part of Hagar's story to see that even when it feels like we have been abandoned by God, or that God is nowhere to be found, that we actually serve a God who sees, and a God who is always there behind the scenes working things out for our own good. So, to get us into this topic, you need to remember that starting in chapter 12 of Genesis, God, in his plan to restore his fallen and broken world, calls the man Abram and his family to pack up all of their things and move to the land of Canaan, where God would not only bless them with that land, but would also bless them with numerous descendants that would eventually become a great nation, the nation of Israel, whom in turn God would use to show himself to the rest of the world as a part of his big plan to bring about the salvation and the restoration of all things. And yet what we find as this story unfolds is that even though Abram and his family take God up on his offer and they make this huge move, at first, it seems that God's not keeping up with his end of the deal. Or you see, even though Abram has done everything that God has called him to do, it has now been 10 years since Abram and Sarah have moved, and they still have no child. And what makes this situation even worse is both Sarai and Abram are getting older. It seems that they have gotten to the place in life where, biologically speaking, they shouldn't be able to have a child. And so, of course, given this difficult place, what Abram and his family decide to do to make sure God's promises actually happen for them is, instead of waiting around for God's timing, they end up taking matters into their own hands by doing this. Genesis 16:1. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Or the plan that Sarai comes up with was to resort to an ancient form of adoption, or a common practice in the ancient world where if a woman was not able to have a child, that woman would give her husband one of her slaves as a kind of surrogate, and through that slave, they would have their child. So their family lineage would continue, which, by the way, logically speaking, makes a whole lot of sense in why it seems that Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. She slept with Hagar, and she conceived. Or, good news, the plan worked, which means the family and God's promises to them to become a great nation is now going to happen, or at least that's the way they see it at this point. And yet, part of this story that I really want you to take notice of here, which we don't normally think about or talk about, is Hagar's role in all of this. Because the truth is, whether Hagar wanted to do this or not as a slave, she really had no choice. Or as far as we can tell, this was something that Hagar had to do given her place in the world, so she ends up marrying Abraham and getting pregnant. And of course, what ends up happening next is to be expected, given that Abram is now married to two women, one who's pregnant and the other one who longs to be pregnant. Or this is what happens. When Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. That's right, she began to despise her mistress. Or maybe for the first time in her life, Hagar, she now has some power. Because now she, in a sense, is the future of this family. The future of the family resides within her. And because of that power and what that might mean for her and her life and the life of her child, she now begins to look down on and despise her master Sarai like she is somehow better. And so this is how Sarai responds. Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong that I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now she knows she is pregnant. She despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." Now, you would think, given all of this drama, that Abram would step in and help these two see that they're actually on the same team, so they need to get this relationship figured out. And yet, that's not what Abram does. No, instead, he says this to Sarai: your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think is best. Your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think is best. And what Sarai does is not to try to make things better by attempting to mend fences and to get things figured out. No, Sarai, because of how Hagar had already treated her, chooses to mistreat Hagar. And even more than that, it seems that Sarai gets so harsh with her mistreatment that Hagar gets to the point where she can't take it anymore. So Hagar fled from her. That's right. Even though we're not told exactly what Sarai does to Hagar, apparently it's so bad that this slave would rather leave and take her chances surviving out in the wilderness all alone as a pregnant woman, which is no easy feat, than to face one more day of dealing with the wrath of Sarai. And so the next time that we encounter Hagar is she's hanging out by a spring, where on her journey away from the horrors of her former life, she is filling up on water to continue her journey into the unknown. And again, I want you to think about this situation from Hagar's perspective. In that, first of all, she is a slave, or a human being who has actually been bought and sold by other human beings, and who lives a life that to a certain extent is not as important as others, where she does not what she wants to do for herself, but what others tell her to do. And yet what makes this hard existence even more difficult is in the midst of all of that, she has to marry Abraham to have his child, and not so she can start her own family, but so that she can be a surrogate for Abram's family. Which then is only made worse because of the drama that begins to develop after she gets pregnant, although she has to own part of that. Where things eventually get so bad that she takes her life and the life of her child into her own hands and flees out into the dangers of the wilderness. And so, what I picture as Hagar is sitting there at that well, filling up and taking a break, is she's having one of those existential moments where she feels abandoned by God. Or one of those moments where, because everything has seemingly gone wrong, where she begins to question if God even cares about her, because it sure doesn't seem like it at this point, right? Or for me, the place that Hagar finds herself in is one of those places that to varying degrees we've all faced before, in that because things have not gone according to our plans, or because tragedy has happened, or because our lives have been blown up in a way that we never expected. It's a place where we begin to wonder where our God is, or why it is our God has not intervened in our situation to make things right, or why God has allowed this to happen in the first place. Or how many of you, if you get really honest with yourself, you know this place. You know this place of darkness and fear where the world just seems empty and cold and meaningless. And how even though you spend a whole lot of time crying out to God in that place, begging Him for help, nothing seems to change. Or where all you get back from God is this: silence. You hear nothing, like you've been abandoned and left all alone in this cold, dark, and unforgiving world. I mean, just this week I've had to help a family that has already lost a daughter begin to deal with the tragic and unexpected death of a son, along with dealing with someone I consider to be a friend being diagnosed with a serious form of cancer. Yeah, again, I think most of us know this place. And yet what we discover as this story moves forward is that even though Hagar feels abandoned by God, what's really going on is that God has not abandoned her, but is actually there with her in that place as a God who is always working in the backgrounds. Because even given all that she has been through, we discover that God, what He has been doing the whole time, is working out His plan for her life and the life of her child. And the reason we know that is because this is what happens next. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. Or it seems that as Hagar is resting next to this well, being overwhelmed by the thought that she has been abandoned by her God, she discovered that God hasn't abandoned her at all, but instead has sent a messenger, an angel, to give her direction or to help her understand her purpose and His plan. The angel says, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will increase your descendants so much that they too will be too numerous to count." The angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery." Or as this conversation between Hagar and God's messenger unfolds, we discover that what God needs Hagar to do is to return back to Sarai and to submit to her authority, which I'm sure is not something that she wanted to hear in the moment, given all that she's already dealt with. And yet the reason God has her to do that is because even though Hagar is a slave, God is going to use that family to make sure her son becomes a great nation. He is going to use all of that to fulfill his purposes for her life. Or when you take a step back, really what's going on here is not only is it God at work through Abraham and Sarai or Sarah, fulfilling his purposes of saving the world through their child Isaac, who will be born shortly in the story, but it's also the case that God is at work in the life of Hagar, creating another great nation through the birth of her child. Or even given all that has happened to Hagar, and that it sure seemed like at points she had been abandoned by God, what's really going on is that God has been at work behind the scenes this whole time. As a God who was with her and for her, helping her to become who he created her to be, the mother of a great nation. And yet, the part of the story that I really want you to get is how Hagar responds to this encounter. Because here we've got something big to learn. Here we've got something that we can hold on to. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. "You are the God who sees me. You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." And what I love about this particular response is it helps us to understand that a big part of who our God is the all-powerful, all-knowing one, is the God who sees. In that, what I think we all have to hold on to in those horrible moments when we feel abandoned and even betrayed by God because life has gotten so hard, and it happens, people, whether you want it to or not, is it just because we feel abandoned and left all alone, or just because things are not working out for us? The truth is, and always will be, that we serve a God who sees. And even more than that, a God who was not only with us, but a God who is constantly at work trying to help us live into his plan for our lives. And so what I think all of that means for us today is the next time something happens to us that sends us into one of those deep, dark places where we feel like we have been abandoned by God, or that the world is nothing but this cold, dark, and miserable, uncaring place, which is going to happen to you again, folks. Just get ready. What we've got to remember when those things happen is that we serve a God who sees it all. A God who also in his seeing is always with us and for us and bigger than anything we will ever face, which means no matter what, one of the things that we have to hold on to with everything that we are through the midst of our difficulty is that we really do serve a God who sees and cares about every single part of our life. Or maybe just to catch a glimpse of just how powerful this truth really is. What I want all of you to do is I want you to repeat after me. You are the God who sees me. You are the God who sees me. You are the God who sees me. And yet as you're saying that phrase, I want you to understand that the me in this sentence, it really is you. Because just like everyone else in this world, you are the one that, because of God's unconditional love for you, that our God cares enough about to watch over and try to help you in every part of your life as the one who really does see and care about you in the deepest possible ways. Which in turn puts into perspective that all life, even when it comes to those moments when we feel abandoned and forsaken by God, is actually a holy and sacred praise where our God is always at work. Because again, everything, and I do mean everything, is holy. Let us pray. Father, as we begin this sermon series this week, it is my prayer that you will open our eyes to see that there is no such thing as the sacred and the profane. There is no such distinctions in the world where you are not there. But instead, help us begin to see that everything is holy, that everything is spiritual. Every part of our lives, Lord, is filled to overflowing with your presence. And so today, oh Lord, help us to understand that even in the darkest moments of our lives, when we feel like we have been abandoned and left all alone, help us to know that the truth is you are a God who sees. And even more than that, a God who cares, and a God who is always at work behind the scenes, helping us to live into the lives that you have created us for. So Lord, help us never to forget this, but most importantly, when those hard times do happen in life, help us to hold on to your truth, your life, who you are with everything that we are, trusting that you are guiding and directing us every step of the way. Lord, we ask all of this in your name and for our sake.